Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 133 of the Hammer Territory podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Sunday afternoon here in early January. I'm joined by Scott Coleman. Scott, for once, you're not the headliner on this podcast. What's going on?
Hey, Brad. That's right. We brought in the big guns for the first weekend show of 2025. I guess actually the second weekend show, because you did a really nice piece yesterday on our beloved Charlie Morton leaving town. But yes, as is always the case, I am far from the headliner on this show today.
That's right. And we are joined by the AJC's own Justin Toscano. I will be refereeing these arch rivals. Justin is an Arizona State guy. Scott's an Arizona guy. We'll let them deal with that. I'll be off the podcast. But Justin, we appreciate you doing this, man. How are you?
No, of course, man. Appreciate you refereeing us. But Scott, I think we settled this on the field actually in late November. So I think we're all good now, right?
We did, yeah. This year, we don't talk about football in Tucson for the last 12 months. It's been a rough go, but hey, it is in my DNA to never root for Arizona State in anything. Football, basketball, soccer, swimming, whatever. But Arizona State, a hell of a performance against Texas last week. And I maybe wasn't quite ready to cheer for you guys, but I was awfully close. And Kenny Dillingham has you boys rolling really well.
Oh man. And I love you guys, but I hope Brennan doesn't get you there. I think he's a great guy and a great coach, but I hope for my own personal selfish stake, he doesn't get you there.
Yeah.
It's of course we're off the rails already, which is what I appreciate about the two of you being on the podcast. Why am I even here? I'm not even sure why I'm on this podcast. I try to get Scott to just do one-on-one, but no. Again, we say just Justin, we appreciate you being here. If people are just finding us for the first time, we are Hammer Territory. We cover the Braves for Foul Territory. Justin does a great, fantastic job at the AJC all year round when he's not cheering on Arizona State. Basically, it's the only time he's not working on the Braves. Look, Justin, let's just dive right in. And we'll ask you the question that everybody always asks us, and I'm sure ask you, what is going on with the Braves and the quiet winter? Because the big story so far here on January 5th is that the Braves have done basically nothing this winter. We've done our absolute best to try to quell the people screaming and panicking about what's going on. But hey, you're on the ground. What's going on with the Braves and all the quiet right now in your mind and what you've heard?
Oh my God. Yeah, you guys are doing the Lord's work putting these out regularly this offseason, man. I haven't had to do one since November, December. Yeah, so I'll take the floor for you guys here so you can give the vocal cords a rest. Yeah, you know what? I think I've had the feeling ever since the beginning of the offseason that the Braves didn't have a ton of money to spend. And the way usually that works is Alex Anthopoulos will get a number from up on high from Liberty Media, and that's what he's got, to work with. That's what he knows, he can do. And really from the second day of the offseason, Alex said that payroll will rise. And I talked to him at the GM meetings, and just some little background. When you talk to Alex, you almost have to key in on like the small things he says, because he's not really going to say anything big. And that's just like who he is, protecting the leverage, protecting kind of whatever plans he has, keeping it close. Totally get it. I would do the same thing. The one thing I keyed in on there, just in terms of how he views this thing, is payroll rising for him is opening day to the next opening day. So if we are to take that means the Braves' cash payroll would just have to be above like 223, 224 million, and that would theoretically be considered an increase in their eyes. I still think they're going to do something big, right? Like, I think they're going to do something big, but I get it from the fan side of things. Like, I mean, ever since I've covered this team, the guy just hammers out all his work in late October, when there's a break in the postseason, and then throughout November and into early December. So you kind of know who's going to be on the team, what they're working with. And now is the point of year where a lot of fans, the point of the offseason, where a lot of fans of all teams are getting a little skittish and a little scared, because I guess, what is this, like January 5th, spring training starts in basically like 5 weeks, I think, dead on. And I still think the Braves have an impactful move or two up their sleeve, but I have gotten the sense that there isn't as much to spend as, fans might hope. And maybe I'm wrong there. Obviously none of that like comes from Alex. You just read the tea leaves, you talk to people. Like, and his number, whatever he got, is obviously not public or even private amongst anybody who might not be in that direct inner circle. But look, like, I thought Max Fried was a guy who probably deserved more consideration in terms of a long-term extension. And I don't mean more consideration as in the front office did a poor job. I mean more consideration as you wish the budget were higher to get something like that done. I thought Teoscar Hernandez made a ton of sense for Atlanta. If you can get another pillar in the outfield there, and a proven guy, obviously he got what he did, and I think probably always wanted to go back to LA. I keep I think your guys' guy Steven said it best in a tweet. What I've been waiting for since the middle of November is that blue box, or to hear about, that text I get on Jordan Montgomery and the Diamondbacks sending over some money. That one I think makes a ton of sense. Like, that one I would say is probably still most likely, just based on the way things might shake out. And if the money's there, guys, I think Tanner Scott makes a lot of sense. I don't know that the Braves would, if that means the Braves would trade Iglesias. You might think they could if they were to sign Tanner Scott. But I think right now, with the profile of those two guys, the way I looked at it, I kind of go back to 2 years ago when Kenley Jansen was the closer, but Alex brings in Iggy, right? So then they're both in the bullpen. He takes over the next year. Sort of a similar thing here. Like, I was really impressed with not only the season he had, but I mean, I've watched him being in the NL East for a few years, watched him, and he was just awesome. And then he goes out to the NL West and goes he wins all 7 battles against Ohtani in that DS. Like, that right there, guys, I think I would try to put a lot of stock into trying to get him if I'm the Braves. I don't know where the budget is, how much money there is to spend, but if you're kind of setting this thing up, right, like, I think you need a good starting pitcher. Like, not just any starting pitcher, you need a good starting pitcher. At this point, I can live with a platoon in left field, though I would not want that as a fan. I'm just saying, if the Braves aren't going to spend a ton of money, get a good starting pitcher and then a great reliever. And I think Tanner Scott works perfectly, especially when you consider in the East, you've got Harper, you've got Schwarber. Now you have Soto. That would force Lindor back to the right side. There's all these reasons that I think Tanner Scott profiles so well for this ball club, if it's not going to take too much to get him. But guys, I'm right there with you. I'm wondering when something's going to happen, and I almost hate it for fans.
So, Justin, you just listed off, I guess, 3 of the 4 positions of potential need: starting pitcher, reliever, outfielder, and then shortstop, which, I mean, I've kind of resigned myself to another 600 plate appearances of Orlando Arcia. Pray for us all. Let's say that you are right. And again, I got to say, man, you cover this team more than probably anybody on the earth. You're always there on the road, which is commendable. You're at the GM meetings, you're at the winter meetings, a tip of the cap to you for your coverage, because I know I learn something from your pieces every day whenever you're on the ground. So with that said, let's say that you're right, that the Braves are strapped for money, whether they should be or not. And that's probably a 2-hour conversation we could have. But if, in your estimation of this team, if you only had the money to add one true impact player at one of those positions, whether it be in the outfield, whether it be in the rotation, or whether it be at the back end of the bullpen, especially without Joe Jimenez next year, is there one position group that you, if you were made GM of the Braves for a day, that you think is maybe the most important, or where you think the most effective use, whether it's a Tanner Scott in the bullpen, you trade for, I don't know, pick a well-paid starting pitcher, or you trade for a good left fielder?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. A lot of times when topics like this come up, I tend to think about the biggest value to a team in terms of how I can quantify that, and we know that a premium position, for example, is more valuable than one that isn't. A starting pitcher in this case would be uber valuable, and you'd be basically weighing the starting pitcher against the left fielder against a shortstop, right? But I think I'm going to go reliever, and I'll tell you why. Because watching this team down the stretch last year, terrific bullpen for most of the season. But down the stretch, after the Minter injury, when guys started to get a little bit tired, Raisel Iglesias aside, I thought there were some cracks in that bullpen, and I thought there were some things there that it really, especially toward that final week or two of the season, you could start to see guys getting tired. I think a Tanner Scott makes all the sense in the world. If you're going to keep Iglesias, like if you can keep both of them, that's where I go, because I don't want to know a world without a Joe Jimenez type setup, man. Right. In that, I'm where I'm coming from in that is I'm weighing out two things. One, I'm weighing out, do I think Jared Kelenic has shown me enough to be an everyday baseball player? No. Like the answer is no. And I love Kelenic. I respect him tremendously. I think the best is still yet ahead of him. I'm just saying, on terms of merit from last season, if I'm in the front office, I don't think he's shown enough where I want that as my worst case scenario. But if it is my worst case scenario and he bats eighth or he bats ninth, fine. I think I have enough offense if my offense is healthy, unlike it was last year. Shortstop, I probably do the same thing. I know I can see Scott just die inside. And I'm sorry, but I think I do the same thing, just because when you have long-term extensions all around the field, this was a thing with the Braves, and it was a conversation when, they were deciding how to move on from Dansby and how to replace him. A conversation was, when you have so many pieces around the diamond that are extended long-term and you have higher salaries for those guys, you've got to build in some cost control. Again, we could have the 2-hour argument that you shouldn't have to do that, but we'll get to that at some point. But I think Arcia for $2-3 million, which you're going to pay him, I almost bet on just putting him at the bottom of the lineup, bat him ninth, whatever. I'm hoping that with Riley and with Olsen and with Harris and with eventually Ronald Acuna Jr., I'm hoping you have enough offense in those other guys, and I'm hoping Sean Murphy has a better year, especially playing more regularly, that you're going to be able to afford, some lapses at the bottom of that lineup. I don't know that I want to see a bullpen that doesn't have the dudes. And what I mean there is, I think Daysbel Hernandez is great. I think Pierce Johnson's great. But we saw at the end of 2024 what happened to Pierce Johnson. We saw what happened to other guys after the Minter injury. They just didn't have much, how should I say it, variability in terms of the way he could handle things, at that point. I want a Tanner Scott, because I still think this team has enough offense to give it a lot of leads, and that bullpen is kind of an equalizer. What I do is I think I wait it out, and if I really want to upgrade across the diamond or, in the outfield, I do it at the trade deadline again. I leave some money for that, which has been a conscious decision that I think the Braves have tried to do in years past and talked about, is leaving enough money for the deadline when they've had their conversations in the offseason. And so that's what I do. That's a very long-winded way of saying I go Tanner Scott, because watching him and just what an equalizer that could be, and really a separator, having another reliever like that, like, I think that is most valuable. And in addition to the fact that I guess I broke down the other couple, but the starting rotation, I think you can get by with either a lesser addition or just filling from within. I think you can get by. I know that fifth, sixth, eighth, whatever, however many options you want to say. I know that back end wouldn't be pretty all the time, but I think there's enough talent there where I feel good enough about Strider, Stale, Lopez, Schwellenbach. Then again, you're not going to have Strider at the beginning of the season. And then again, you're not going to have Acuna at the beginning of the season. So I guess that has to change it, but you're really looking at I think they're truly planning for the possibility that Jimenez could be out all year. Like that is a distinct possibility.
Yeah.
Like he's going to be out most of the year at the very least. I think you need another guy back there.
Yeah, I think it's almost been, and it's been covered plenty, but I don't think it's always clicked into fans yet that Jimenez is not going to be there for a long time, and he's a huge piece of that bullpen. There's also a joke to be made that we made before about Alex is not afraid to pay or invest in a reliever. He is certainly willing and eager to spend resources in the bullpen, even if it's just like to embolden a strength. And there's this conversation we can have even about, is it better to make your strength stronger or to patch a hole somewhere else? And that there's a kind of philosophical thing there. I was going to ask you this, Justin, I guess I'll just do it now, about covering this front office, because, we should use your insight on this because, you referenced it earlier about the Braves usually work quickly early in the off seasons. They also usually just announce things. Very rarely do things get a lot of buildup with this front office. It's not like the source wars for days on end like it is with some other teams. It just kind of like pops up, whether it's broken by somebody else or by the team or whatever. Fans always are curious about this. So I wanted to ask you, like, how is it to deal with a front office that just like very, very actively does not want to leak to you or anybody else? Like, they want to be really buttoned up. How does that change things? And also, like, what do you just make of that in general? Because as a fan, obviously we joke about it all the time. It's bad for us. It's bad for content creation. Like, but also if I'm just a fan, like, I think I actually kind of like that. That's my most personal view. Like, I think I kind of appreciate it. If only we had a little bit more to talk about. But as someone that's doing the job full time like you are, and also just within the framework of baseball, like, what do you make of the way that the Braves have operated and how it might kind of make them? I don't think Alex cares about this, but like, it also isn't the greatest for PR sometimes when they just kind of they go silent for 6 weeks, and it's like, all right, fan base can just kind of run wild with whatever they want to say.
Yeah. I think it's probably like what I assume it would be like covering the White House or like the Cold War or World War II or something like that. Like, it's pretty impenetrable in terms of information. I think what I appreciate about Alex is his transparency on how he handles things, and that if you're a beat guy and you're actually looking to understand something, he's very accessible, and he's not going to hide in that way. That's what I really appreciate about him. Is that, one, he's honest about, as tough as it makes our jobs, right? Like, one, he's honest about how he goes about things and not leaking things. Two, he doesn't go out and give stuff to national guys. Like, I think as a beat guy, like, that's the important thing I think fans should understand. Is it would be one thing if this guy were like, okay, I'm going to shut out the beat, but every time, I have something, I'm going to give it to, I don't know, one of the national guys or
Rosenthal. I'm just kidding.
Something like that. Yeah. But he doesn't do that. So you can take him seriously and at his word. And it's like, okay, whatever. That's just how he operates. Right. Cause I get it. It stinks for you guys. It kind of stinks for us. Because anytime anybody has something, it's almost always coming from like the other team, which like, like I wouldn't know a player development person on the Rockies or something like that, unless I'd crossed paths with them before. But it's so a lot of times it's trying to get things in very unique ways. But even then it could be tough because you don't want to burn your sources, because if people know that things aren't going to come from the president of baseball operations and general manager, then there's kind of a process elimination that can be done for sometimes for how you get things. And so, Brad, I know you're very aware of that game and trying to keep those people, keep them protected. So that's just, it's interesting. I like it in a way because it means you're not always chasing rumors, because there's really no rumors to be had with this team. Like, I truly think they check in on everybody. Like, he does his job, right? Like, that's Alex's job, is to find, what every guy's looking for, and what, to kind of keep his ear to the ground in that way. But you're not having, again, like you said, to do like the source wars. You're not having to go chase down all these non-updates throughout the offseason. But then again, it certainly would be easier for content's sake, because if my editor came to me tomorrow and said, what are you going to write? Like, I don't know if I can write about the rotation for the 5th time this offseason. Like, I don't know if that, I'd have to find a unique spin on that one. So it's fun. I think, look, as a beat guy, you're probably not going to get screwed over. It's like, you're not really going to get beat locally unless somebody's getting something from another source. And that's what I try to do. And then 2, at least he's transparent about like, hey, this is the way, I just don't like to, and I know he said that publicly, like he just doesn't like to have a bunch of rumors out there, because then people can even spin things more than they could if there's nothing. So I do get why he does it. But my whole PSA, like in terms of like this is my shoot, I've been out of college for oh god, like almost 6 years, like this is more than 6 years. That seems like a long time. But uh sports should be fun. Like I understand this is a multi-billion-dollar business, but I've never understood like the just the secrecy. Like, and I'm not talking about Alex in general. I'm just talking about in general. Like, I've never understood like who cares? Like I remember there was a day you'll talk to the baseball writers at the winter meetings who did this 20 years ago, and they'd say it was just like way better. You just like pull up to the hotel bar, you're talking to everybody, things get here, out here and there, or people are willing to tell you some stuff. Now it almost feels like everything is just such a state secret, which I think, there's certain ways to get things. And then the question would be, is it reportable? Uh but I almost sometimes I almost laugh because I'm like, this is baseball. Like this isn't like life or death. Like nobody's dying here if like the Braves don't sign Tanner Scott or don't trade for Jordan Montgomery, or at least I hope nobody's dying. But yeah, it's an interesting experience because I think when you've got a front office that's pretty hell bent on keeping everything in, I truly think you can do that as long as everybody's committed to not leaking things. And for the most part, I think that's how it's been. So like kudos to Alex, like he's instituted that. And I think it helps him. Like it eliminates the distractions and like trying to get things done. And like, it eliminates the distractions in terms of like, players seeing something on social media or um, and so I think players do see things on social media from us before. I know that for a fact. Sometimes from us before they hear it in house. But I think a lot of times it eliminates the distraction of like the Aaron Nola thing last year, where it was like, yeah, the Braves went super hard after Aaron Nola, but they did not pay as much as was reported, or they did not offer, I should say, as much as was reported. And I think if you kind of keep it in like one straight line, it probably makes it easier if you're like a baseball decision maker. So I get that. But sometimes I wish people would just be like, yeah, you know what? Like we offered that guy, or yeah, we offered our top 5 prospects for that guy and couldn't get him. Or like, yeah, we really wanted Mike Trout, but we offered like, they wouldn't take our top 10 prospects. I don't know. You wish you hear some of that stuff, but it is yeah, it's kind of a weird experience. And like I said, what I would think covering, the White House or some, clandestine operation like that would be.
So, Justin, I wanted to get your take because you're around the team closely and in the clubhouse and all that. And obviously, in the last couple of weeks now, Max Fried left to go to the Yankees. Not a shocker to anyone. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you had some reporting that maybe a year or two ago, the Braves did try to work on some contract extension talks with Max. Is that right? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah. So last offseason, I had heard that I was trying to do, I think it was winter meetings, and I was trying to do something on like trying to remember the situation. Oh, you know what? So last offseason, we were kind of at the same place, right? Like we're all talking about, okay, the Braves need like another starting pitcher. Like it's got to be a good starting pitcher. Like it can't just be any starting pitcher. And I was writing on how that was even more pressing considering that like Freed's last year was probably almost certainly going to be 2024. And so I had heard that the at the the before the 2023 season was the first time. I think that's what it was. I'm getting my dates mixed up. Yeah, before the 2023 season was the last time that the Braves and then Fried and his representatives from CAA had discussed the contract extension. And they exchanged numbers, and they went back and forth, but they kind of fizzled. And that kind of told me, I was like it's not great, especially because then in 2023, Freed had the forearm, right? So he like makes what I think it was 14 regular season starts, I believe.
Yeah.
And then like at that point, you're kind of thinking like, you know, why would the Braves go, what would, if they weren't willing to, if those sides didn't match up back then, like, why would they now? Right. And as guys get closer to free agency, obviously, as you guys know, and lot of diehards know, they become more expensive in most cases. So yeah, and then I checked in with somebody this time around after he signed with the Yankees, because I figured, I was like, well, maybe they did discuss it more, and I heard that was still the last time they discussed it. So my inkling at the time, about a year ago, was correct. But just a bummer, I think, like, you can see both sides of it. Like, one, I would have liked, you're covering the team, so you want the team, I'm objective, but it's in my best interest for the team to be good, because that makes it fun and not terrible. But I think, like, you would like to see the Braves have, I don't want to say tried harder, but been more able to re-sign a guy like that. But on the other hand, I could totally see, like I never foresaw 218 million. Like, that's crazy. And I'm not saying that, like, I don't mean that in any disrespect to Max, who is a terrific competitor, got 5 terrific pitches, never gives guys the same at bat twice in a game. Like, the dude's phenomenal, and he's going to do great in New York. He deserves it. But I can see why the Braves weren't willing to go even near there. Like, you kidding me? Like, I would use, and if you had that money to spend, why not spend it, in a couple different places if you're willing to go that high? So it makes sense, like, that business side. But yeah, I had heard that. So a few weeks back, I heard, whenever the winter meetings, whenever he signed in December or something, about a month ago, that that was still the last time they talked, was before the 23 season, which kind of tells you, I think, that the Braves got to their point of comfort, same way they did with Dansby Swanson, and then it was, like, off the table, right? Like, and I think that's kind of what they do. They're very rigid in that way, and to a degree, you have to be when you operate, as they do. And I'm not saying it's bad business at all. Like, I totally see why they do it. I can see both sides of the equation. If you're a fan, you're hurt. But if you're the Braves, like, no way you're paying that guy that much. But certainly weird to see another main piece of the core and a guy from that 21 team just, like, gone.
And I mean, another kind of legendary piece of that 21 team was Charlie Morton, who signed 24 hours ago as of recording this. I think everybody who covers the team day in and day out seemingly has a Charlie Morton story, or 2 or 3 or 4. You ask any of the players, who in this organization means a lot to you? And I feel like the answer is always Charlie Morton. And even Travis d'Arnaud too, who of course just left. Justin, you talk to Charlie a lot. What kind of impact is it going to have? Because sure, Charlie maybe was not an ace at age 40 anymore, but behind the scenes, man, it seems like he was just the guy for a whole lot of things.
Totally. Yeah. And one thing, I think he gets a bad rap, like, on social media, especially because, like, dude, I get it. Like, if you're giving up 5 runs or something, like, and I'm a fan watching a baseball game, but he, like, roll my eyes, like, come on, man. But I think it's tough to put up a 4 ERA at age 40. And I think we see a lot of these teams who have guys they wish would put up a 3.8 or a 4 or even a 4.2 and can't do it. So that consistency here provided was big. But you know what? Like, I think the impact behind the scenes is that the clubhouse loses not only a leader, because Charlie's not that rah guy, he's just not, but, like, a father figure. And that's big. Like, when you had a guy like Spencer Schwellenbach, when you had a guy like Spencer Strider 2 years ago, as we're talking now, when you had a guy like even Max Fried would talk to Charlie Morton, and they would go back and forth, and Charlie was sort of that steadying hand. Charlie was sort of the you're never as bad as you think you are guy, when, like, when guys are struggling, because I mean, and he lived it, right? Like, he was a guy who thought he was going to be done after 2015. Like, he thought he was done and thought he'd never, like, play again, never pick up a ball again. And ever since then, every single year, he's had, that inkling, like, oh, should I retire? Is it over? Okay. And then a team makes a decision for him, and he keeps going. I think it's huge, because you lose more of that personality. Like, every pitching staff needs one of those guys. Now it's going to be Sale. Like, Sale's as much as anybody in baseball is a vocal and by example leader, by all accounts, from guys in the clubhouse. But Morton was kind of that really like gentle fatherly figure for guys who were figuring it out. He was always there. Really funny. Like I don't think people know that, but like he's like super funny. Like he just and the way he thinks about things is very I always really appreciated that. And he's very vulnerable. And I think it's like cool to see a guy who's done everything he's wanted to do in baseball and can now reflect on it. I think my favorite I have so many times like stories of going to Charlie for what I thought was going to be like a quote for like a story I had to ask him and was standing there for 30 minutes and then had like too much to transcribe and it made my job tougher for all the best reasons. He was just awesome. And I think like this last year, the last 2 years, the last September and then 2 Septembers ago, 23, and then this past year almost felt like the duality of man's passions and intentions in a way that sounds way more elegant than I mean. I mean, on one hand, you had the guy who felt, and I talked to him about this a bunch, like you had the guy who felt that if he was still hitting 96 on the gun and spinning like 3,000 RPMs in the curveball, like he could pitch, like he had to pitch the next year. Like it wasn't time to give it up. And on the other hand, you had the father who knew that every second he was talking to me, he would say this. He's like, I know every second that I'm in this clubhouse, I'm away from my wife and I'm away from my kids and I'm missing those important steps being a dad. And you almost could feel as much as you can. Like, I don't know that Charlie wears emotions on his sleeve. That's not the right term. You could just feel the palpable pull between each of those things. And I thought that was really interesting of somebody who was like so vulnerable in that way of like willing to be like, yeah, like, like I'm making this money and I'm pitching and I'm doing what I love and I'm a competitor, but I'm also a dad. And I think it just goes to show how competitive these guys are that like, yeah, like if you're like him and baseball, the game didn't force you out. The game's not telling you have to retire right now. That like, yeah, of course you're going to keep pitching. And I didn't think he would get 15 million. Do I think it'll be worth it for the Orioles? Sure. Yeah. Like I think in a couple different ways, that's very good for them. The Braves weren't going to give him that. And so I'll miss Charlie, but I think those are, I'm trying to think of, he's kind, he's got a good heart. Like teammates just absolutely adore him. Like you're totally right, Scott. Like the answer you always get is, about how guys love Charlie and how, he's this to them, he's that to them. I think the cool thing about him is he's just such a regular dude. I don't usually share stories like this, but I will in his case because he's awesome. But like I'm flying back to, we were in San Diego and I'm flying back, during the All-Star break. And I'm like, I'm cooked that day. Like I stayed up till however long. Look, last night was the draft night or whatever. So I'm just exhausted. And I step into my window seat and I fall asleep. I wake up during still boarding. There's a guy sitting next to me with a kid. And, his wife is in front of him, another kid, whatever. It's Charlie. And you could not, I mean, he might have had maybe 3 people recognize him. Like, because he's such a regular dude. Like, and he was nice to people. Like, hey, like, how you do? Oh my God, thank you. Wow, that's really nice of you to say. Thank you. Okay, yeah, thanks for. People would say, well, we love watching you pitch, and he's just such a regular guy. And I think that's the special thing about him is there's certain guys in this game that make you feel like they're still, there's a human in there. And I know there's a human in all of them, obviously, but they still seem like these just down home dudes. And Charlie was one of them. And I just man, just I'll miss asking that first question and getting like 8 minutes and more than I ever, had thought. But the level of, just like he would teach you things and he would, if you weren't getting it, you could ask him and he'd be like, no, it's this, or no, this, or I mean this, or like you'd ask him something and he'd like look at his stare out into the distance and he'd go, yeah, it's really weird because I don't know. I've seen the numbers you're talking about on my curve, but I just don't know. And I don't know how to think about it like that because honestly, like this, and he'd bring up something else, and he'd go, but then again, I mean, I really do need to pay attention to this, and sometimes I think that it like, and it was like you were seeing somebody's mind unwind in time. And I know I'm going on and on, but I think the guy's special. And I think my favorite conversations with him were a story I did before 23, where he was like, he used to be just this like very anxious human being. And I think maybe still, is to a degree. I don't know if that ever leaves a person. I don't want to speculate that. I just mean like you can tell he's very self-aware and he thinks intensely about things. And he was just explaining to me like how that, having anxiety and that had kind of gone away as his career, as you validate the things and as you go through game sevens and you have success. And to me, it was like, it was so freaking cool because that's a guy that could have easily been out of baseball after 2015. And now look, we're going into 2025 and he's still pitching, man. He deserves the best. And I hope, I hope he does really well there because he'll have deserved it.
That's the resident Charlie Morton guy. That was a fun trip. I enjoyed that, Justin. Thank you for all that.
Yeah.
I was actually, this is more back to baseball, but do you think that the Braves had interest in bringing Charlie back at all? Or was it a situation where they were kind of just like, we're going to mutually part ways? Was there a number where they maybe would have brought him back? That was a question that I was going to ask you at some point.
Yeah, you know what? Like, I don't know this for sure. I would say it would have had to been like under 10 million. Like, I don't think, based on his level of production, like, I don't think he was ever going to get 10 or 15 from this front office, from Alex. And that's just, again, like my own speculation, reading the tea leaves and, and some of, what you hear. But it's like, I know that it was a bit early in the offseason when I first heard that he was leaning toward pitching again. It was still early in the offseason. Markets hadn't been established. I get the sense that if the Braves had the room, budget wise, Charlie would have there would have been a way to make something work. Because I don't think he's done. Like, I just don't think he's done.
Yeah.
Maybe there'll be a point this year where you look at it and you're like, okay, like he might be on his way out, but I think he'll pitch fine for the Orioles this year. I just think it would have had to been less than 10 million in my opinion, like my perception of it, like 8, 7, 6.
Yeah.
And at that point, like, that's not cool. You're going down from 20 mil on a guy like that who's meant so much to you. So it would have made a lot of sense. Them, or honestly, without the stadium situation, I think Tampa would have made a lot of sense. He's played there before, close to where he lives, easy in that way. But I just, it was going to have to be a lot less than what he got in my opinion.
It's almost easier, and you kind of alluded to it there, for him to go somewhere else. Not because we agree that 15 million for Morton wasn't going to happen in Atlanta, but to go from 20 down, like the logistics of that, it may not seem like it's a big deal, but in this professional landscape, like to stay in the same spot and take a 70% pay cut is not usually what happens. It's like you kind of have to do that going somewhere else. Which makes sense to me. And Baltimore also has a bigger need, so it's not an Orioles podcast, but they kind of needed him. I guess we'll ask this question. Sorry, Scott, if you're going to do this. AJ Minter is still a free agent. Justin, any chance of a reunion there, given that, we talked about Terrence Scott. Obviously, Terrence Scott's at a different tier than AJ, I think, given the health stuff and all of that. But the Braves have a needed bullpen. They have a relationship with AJ dating back forever. It seems kind of quiet there, but does that seem like it's a plausible scenario, or is that a situation where he just kind of looks to go somewhere else?
Yeah, I think that's plausible for sure. I mean, as much as anybody in that clubhouse, Minter was like a Braves way guy. And what I mean by that was like always the guy, when he had to face the music or the team had to face the music, where he was like, look, like we're playing, he said it all the time, like we're playing, for all these Hall of Famers that came before us, like all Braves, the quintessential Brave, like, was AJ Minter, and I think just such a great personality to have around too. That's totally plausible. Like, I think that would still be, if the Braves have the money for that, and you would think what he could command is lower because of that hip surgery and the rehab and going through that. I would think it's plausible. It would work for both sides, right? Because the Braves get somebody at perhaps a little bit lower of a value because of that. AJ Minter gets to prove his health and kind of rebuild his value, somewhat similar to like a Kirby Yates type deal. from a couple years ago, where now Kirby Yates is, dude, he's got like legs, he's got new life, like legs on that career. Like it's been awesome to see. I think it could be something like that, because I think AJ Minter would want. I mean, he said as much, right? Like on the record, this year, like that he would want to stay. Like after the injury, said that. Like I'm pretty sure, like if I'm remembering correctly, that he would want to stay. I've always seen it as plausible. It's just gonna come down to like money, and I think the one I would think it's a shoe-in. Like I would have thought it was a shoe-in months ago, but then when Jimenez got injured, when we then learned that Ronald and Strider weren't going to be ready for opening day, that almost created like 2 or 3 other pressing holes. But AJ Minter could be a nice fallback if the Braves don't get, this stud, reliever / closer. It's somebody I thought was definitely a shoe-in until it became clear that the Braves had more holes than we thought, right?
And, Justin, we'll wrap up after this, but just your take. And it's funny, you said a moment ago, it'd be kind of hard to write about the starting rotation because we don't know what the starting rotation might look like. But as we sit here, it's first weekend in January. The projections and the folks in Vegas, and Fangraphs, and everywhere still think very highly of this baseball team. I think most people outside of Atlanta anticipate the Braves doing something, even if it's not going out and signing a half dozen free agents between now and spring training. But I guess from your view, going in, we're less than 3 months away from opening day. Where do you see this team in 2025? I know we've talked around it a little bit on this show, but just, I guess, your take on the state of the roster as we sit here in early January.
Yeah, I still think, excuse me, I still think it's one of the best rosters in baseball. And I thought last year it was the best roster in baseball going into that season. Now the Dodgers have added to a point where, it's got to be them. But it's still one of the best rosters in baseball. And they're going to win the division. Like, I think that. I believe that, just because I think there's a lot of concerning things with Philly, whether it's that outfield, whether it's, defensively, whether it's, the rotation that slowed down toward the end of the year, whether it's the bullpen and how they performed, in the postseason.
Philadelphia has gotten really old in a hurry. Like everyone on that team is on the wrong side of like 32.
Totally. And that was why, like, honestly, like big picture, it's not a Phillies podcast, just like Brad said, it's not an Orioles podcast, but they needed to win 2 years ago when they were in it, 2 years ago, or, a year ago, when they lost to the Diamondbacks. Like, those were the years. Like, you beat a juggernaut Braves team, you're playing with house money in that way, and they couldn't do it. And now, like you said, like, they're getting old in a hurry. Guys, I still subscribe to I know star power is good. The Mets need to build around Soto. David Stearns is a proven organization and team builder. He's going to be great for them. That should scare Braves fans. Like, David Stearns is a very smart guy. But I just still think the Braves have the raw power and numbers in terms of depth, like in terms of how many great players the Braves have, like up and down the lineup, up and down the pitching staff. I just still think the Braves are the better team. I think the Braves are going to win the division. And I think, too, like, this is the first year, it feels like, in a few, or at least ever since I've been on the beat, that the Braves could have a legitimate chip on their shoulder. In terms of, like, you can have a chip on your shoulder, but when you're the favorites, the clear favorites, like, that's kind of a hard thing to play into. I think this year it's going to be like, okay, well, people think this of us, people think that of us, like, people think the roster wasn't good enough. Like, okay, well, the Phillies did this, the Mets did this, everybody's talking about them. I think the Braves are going to come out, with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, a little bit of a vengeance. I think Chris Sale's going to feature that. I think, guys, one of the biggest things I thought was missing last year was Spencer Strider's personality, which is that of like a Chris Sale, like in terms of just that go get him, like, competitor, like, leave no stone unturned. Like, he's gonna, like, that dude will, you're gonna have to bloody him and drag him through the street to beat him in the fight. Like, he's tough. And I think him and Acuna coming back and having that, motivation after losing another year of his career. Like, I think there's a lot to like with this team, and it is like a funny juxtaposition with kind of how we started this podcast. And that first question you guys asked about the quiet off season is like, yes, I would, for as much fan support as the Braves get, as much as I see people in the merchandise lines, as much as I see people in the food lines, as much as people go to spring training, as much as they support the events throughout the year, I wish, Liberty Media would do more to supplement that budget. But they still have a terrific roster. Like, it's still a top 3 roster in baseball, in my view. And that's if they don't do anything else this offseason. I think they're still got an impactful move or two ahead of them. I think it's just had to been a little more of a deliberate process for Alex, who's always got something up his sleeve. Probably be a guy we haven't even thought of. It'll probably go well. That's been the track record so far. Yeah. And they still have like a high payroll in terms of like the luxury tax figure, and they've still committed to investing in the guys long term, which has been good. They're set up for years to come, but I think this one could be special because for the first time in a few years, it feels like they're not just dead in the center of the radar, right?
I have a theory, Justin, before we let you go. I think he was waiting, and when I say he, I mean Alex, for Arizona State to be out of the playoff, and now they can make a move. Just to bring things full circle. I think he was just like, hey, Justin probably can't do anything for a couple of weeks here. He's busy. He's covering. He's not really covering the Sun Devils, but following. I know you bring the building for the game. Now the dam can break. It's Sunday. Maybe it'll be tomorrow. Look, there's a history of the Braves making moves on Monday mornings. I don't know if you're aware of this, Justin, dating back to before you were on the beat. Monday morning has been a big circle for Alex at times. So it's – and by the way, we know this because we do podcasts on Sundays, and they're often ruined by Monday morning transactions. So I'm not that I'm calling my shot here, but now that you're back at home, you're doing your normal stuff, it might be time. Just a theory.
It could be time. You know what? And for Braves fans, like, thankfully, the Sun Devils didn't go all the way. Like, everybody expected them to, like we all I expected to be done January 21st after that January 20th natty. So now we got it. Now Alex has got a couple more weeks freed up. But yeah, I think there'll be something. I would be very, very surprised if spring training started and they hadn't done anything impactful. Like, that would shock me. And I'll probably get clipped for saying that. And if they don't do anything, it'll get played by somebody, one of your listeners. But I would be very, very, very shocked. I don't want to throw the jinx in on that one for everybody who's just waited for 2.5 months now for a move. It's felt like a 5-month offseason. It really has.
Yeah. We've been teasing for a while that we're going to do a show in mid-February of just like screaming if they haven't made a move yet. And by the way, you're welcome to come back on your way to spring training if you want to come back on anything by then. We'd be definitely happy to have you back, Scott. If there's anything else you want to ask Justin, get it in there, and if not, we could let your longtime collegiate rival go.
Yeah, no, thank you, Justin, for taking the time. I would never wish work on anyone, but I hope you're really busy for like the next 4 weeks, because that would mean that we've gotten some moves, some trades, some signings. But sincerely, thank you for coming on the show. And I'm not just saying it to say it. You do a terrific job covering the Braves on the beat, and open invite. Anytime you want to come back on the show, you are more than welcome to.
Thanks. No, thanks for having me. Thanks for the kind words, man. It means a lot. You guys, so Brad, you mentioned that just coming on and streaming if they don't do anything. If they don't do anything, you guys should host your first like live podcast event, and you should fly over here to Atlanta, Scott. And you guys should go to one of those rooms where, like, what do they call them? Like, where you break a ton of stuff and you just like let all your anger out. Like, so you guys should have like everybody and all the listeners like set up like a feed and have everybody come out and just like break a ton of things if there aren't. I don't think you'll need to do that screaming podcast though.
We will see. Justin, I'm sure you don't need to plug your work on our podcast because people that listen to us probably are reading you, but anything you want to share about the AJC or anything else you want to get out there? I know people should be paying for the AJC if they aren't already.
Yeah, hopefully pay for the AJC, subscribe, follow us on AJC.com, Justin C. Toscano on Twitter. I think now everybody is safe from Arizona State football takes and
for a while
and reactions anyway. And for a while. So yeah, it should be ramping up. Hopefully yeah, like I would to Scott's point about not wishing work on anybody. I feel like I've had 3 months off. Like I went to San Antonio, I went to Dallas, but I almost feel like refreshed for the first time in 6
Well,
years.
don't tell your editor that. I know you have a new editor now because Christopher Moore, my guy, just left. But
Oh yeah.
don't tell your new editor that you're refreshed. That's not a good thing to tell an editor. They're like, hey, I'll send you other stuff. You can start doing basketball or whatever. Like, they'll make you busy if you want to be.
Oh yeah. No, okay. I actually, what I meant to, did I say I was? I meant burned out. I'm sorry.
Totally.
We've been doing that. I meant burned out. Man, see, that's how burned out I am. Is that now I'm getting my phrases wrong. No,
That's right.
It's going to be fun, guys. It's going to be fun, and I think there will be a day again when the Braves will hoist it all at the end of the season.
Justin, thanks one more time. We definitely appreciate you coming on. We hope you will do it again. We won't book you too often. I'll just put the bug in Scott's ear to kind of, all right, Justin, it might be time for Justin again. We'll see what's going on there. Scott, thank you for being here as always, my friend. It's always fun to talk with you, even if Justin's not here, or especially when he is. As for everybody else, please subscribe to us. Check out the AJC, but Hammer Territory right there alongside. Follow Scott on Twitter. Follow me if you want to. The show's at Hammer Territory. We appreciate everybody listening. We'll have more coming up later on this week, and we'll see everybody next time.